Today's podcast features a farmer.
Todd Western III. I live currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in Waterloo, Iowa. I take great pride in being a sixth-generation farmer that is actively farming that farm, both in Mahaska County and Waterloo.
I'm Beth Hoffman, journalist, author, and farmer in South Central Iowa, and you're listening to At the Iowa Farm Table, a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition, a group of more than 50 organizations in Iowa working to make the food system more just, equitable, and sustainable. Todd Western III and his family have been farming the same ground in Iowa since 1864. They're also African American.
Imagine 1864. Prior to that, it was Emancipation Proclamation. After that, it was the end of slavery. And then my family settles in 1864 in Mahaska County. And just let that sink in 1864, with all those major events happening in the world, our family basically put a stake down and said, this is where we're going to start our family legacy. So I'm proud to say 161 years later, we still farm that same farm.
The Western family has weathered many events in the 160 plus years of their farm. There's of course the weather and markets to deal with as farmers, but African Americans have also faced discrimination throughout our country's history. In an historic class action suit in 1999 called Pigford versus Glickman, Black farmers prove they've systematically been denied loans and other assistance by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And a report in 2009 found that complaints by farmers of color against the USDA were not handled properly. But Western and his family had issues closer to home, issues that changed everything.
Everything is going well. I'm working a corporate job up in Minneapolis. My dad, who was the first black supervisor, John Deere, where he worked for 41 years, he was training for his 13th marathon. My mom was singing opera, so we were always chasing her around, listening to her. Life was great. At that time, I thought, okay, at some point later in my life, I'm going to go back and help Dad farm the farm. Well, in July 2008, my father went out like he would normally do. He would work all day, maybe work on the farm about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Then he would ride his bike to the local track, and he would jog around the track and come home. Well, this particular night, my mom gets a knock at the door at 1 o'clock in the morning, and my father died in a bicycle accident. He died 1 week before his 65th birthday and 9 months before his retirement. And so, right around July, August, me and my brother looked at each other and said, holy crap, there's still a crop in the field. We're so preoccupied with the grief and the shock that, yeah, there's a crop in the field that Dad planted in April that we got to get out. And so from that point on, we just stepped up and we got things going. And at that point, I have my son of my own, building my own family. My brother, who lives in Waterloo, was a city planner. My mom has to come out of retirement after she got her doctorate, and she really started to learn the business of farming. Dr. Barbara Western, as I like to call her, we call her the CEO. Mom got us really in a good position financially and operationally on the farm.
Todd Western had to quickly learn a lot about farming, and he also became even more interested in the farm's history.
To be honest with you, like a couple years before my father passed away, I started understanding and learning some of the history of our farm. And I was like, wow, owning this farm for, at the time, was over 150 years is a big deal. And so when he passed, I really got into the history of our farm and talking to people and learning about that in 1944, 14% of the farmers were Black. And today there's less than 2%. So then I start to use our farm to say, okay, here's how we fit in that history. We've lasted 160 years, and we're part of that 1.4% population. And in Iowa, there's 86,000 farmers in Iowa, and there's only 59 Black farmers. So in my mind, I'm like, we owe it to our legacy and to our ancestors to say, hey, we're going to keep this going. We're going to make sure that we're registered with the state of Iowa as a century farm. And we're going to talk about it proudly and just say, hey, we're the Westerns, we're farmers, and we're part of the farming community. Farming is hard, no matter who you are, no matter what color. Farming is hard because we all are at the mercy of Mother Nature, right? And then the second thing we're at mercy of is pricing. And so those two things don't care what color you are. But then when you're a Black farmer, you have these other dynamics that are in play. Remember, I'm 59, so in the 70s and 80s, the conversations about Black farmers was non-existent. If it was, the Black farmers raised that you didn't talk too much about the farm because it could be taken away from you. And today, a farmer of color is always in a position of validating ourselves. For example, if I go to a conference and I sit at a table and I wear my Western Farm shirt, the first thing they'll do is they'll try to understand, okay, Western Farms, you must work on the farm. And then when I tell them I don't work on the farm, they look at me and say, well, who owns the farm? And I say, I own the farm. So I go through this whole thing of how I own it, when did I own it? And then you still get that look of, that's kind of odd. I've never heard of that many Black farmers. And I always tell them, who do you think built the South for free? When, the diesel fuel guy comes out and he says, is the owner around? And I said, that'd be me. And then we have to go through the question of, when did I own it? How did I own it? How long have I owned it? Then you get to a question of, do you lease the equipment? Do you own the equipment? Now, this is the diesel fuel guy, right? So it's a constant state of validation of who we are and how we got what we got. I will say I have not experienced any negativity. And even those that question, I use that opportunity to educate. And so that they don't make that mistake again to assume that there are no Black farmers or farmers. I mean, again, when I mean farmers of color, like the indigenous people, obviously, right? I mean, the farming starts with them. Indigenous, Asian, Mexican, Black, we're all farmers. When you plant a seed in the dirt, we're all farmers.
Over the years, Western became increasingly curious. Where were the other Black farmers in Iowa, and what were their stories?
I thought to myself, if there's only 59 Black farmers in Iowa, what if they've gone through the same thing I've gone through with sudden death? Or what if they've gotten things to celebrate? They've been around a long time. And what if their generations prior did not celebrate the farm the way they need to be celebrated? So I said, you know what? Let me start the Iowa Farmers of Color back around 2021, 22. And it literally started with about 10 people on a Zoom call, and it would grow each week. We got to like maybe 20 people. And all it was very informal, like, oh, hey, how are you? I didn't, where's your farm? Where's your farm? What do you grow? And then with my personality, I'm like the unofficial event planner and I like big productions. And so I said, you know what? We need to make this bigger. So we made it official. We started the Iowa Farmers of Color in 3 years ago. It's for all farmers, but I have to say farmers of color because that way the farmers of color feel it's a safe space to come to, because, there's certain conferences you go to where you're not as welcome to be there. We get all races there, all genders there. We get specialty crop, we get ranchers, we get a lot of urban agriculture. The number one goal is just to build community to know each other. Number two is to bridge that information gap between the farmers and the state agencies. And number three is to just come away with motivation and ideas that you can take to your farm to create more revenue for your farm. One of the ladies, she was an older lady, was leaving the conference. And I said, how did you like the conference? And she said, sweetheart, this was food for the soul. So once she told me that, I knew I was onto something.
Today, the Western family continues to farm in both Mahaska and Black Hawk counties.
I do live in Minneapolis, but I go back to the farm twice a month. My son actually got involved as well. He comes back with us, but he actually started his own agriculture business. He actually grows microgreens for the restaurant downtown, and the business is booming so much that he's actually had to employ my other two daughters, Alexandra and Addison, to help with the business on a weekly basis. And I'm happy to report that now we're into a lot of regenerative agriculture programs.
What I learned is, number one, regenerative agriculture, it doesn't happen overnight. We started it about 8 years ago, and we can see the slow process of the crop getting better, the soil getting better. I always tell people it's not as sexy and fun as back in the day when you get that plow, that disc, and you're really in there just tilling the dirt. But we're saving money, and we're being better for the environment, and we're getting more revenue on our crops.
It's a paradox that often the most challenging experiences in our lives make us who we are today. Todd Western III ended up finding his calling in farming and educating people about Black farmers.
You've heard that statement called, what is your why? I think I found my purpose. And the beauty of it is, I guess, is out of tragedy with my father's untimely death in 2008, I've turned that into now my why, my purpose, that is not necessarily for me. It's to highlight my ancestors and then to set it up for my children. You know, my ancestors went through a lot in the last 161 years. And so just honoring that legacy to say, hey, it was not for all not.
Thank you to Todd Western III and his family for sharing your story. This is At the Iowa Farm Table, a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition. Thanks to Tommy Hexter and Mallory DeVries for editing. I'm Beth Hoffman. Thanks for listening.